Today is an exciting day for me. I'm finally got back to the John boat. Today we're going to tackle the underside, which is all the leaks that I tested in a previous video, which all primarily came from the blind pop rivets that are on the bottom of it. So stick around, it's going to be exciting, and I'm going to show you how I get it done. Kind of common on my videos, I'll show you all the tools that I'm going to use to accomplish this task of removing pop rivets, replacing them. Some of them I'm just going to reseal. I'm gonna hit again and seal them up again. What you're going to need for this, for the pop rivets themselves, if you're replacing it, you're going to need a drill with a wire brush on it to clean it and inspect it. I have a 1/4-inch drill bit here for removing the old pop rivets. The old pop rivets are 1/4-inch shank, so that's a 1/4-inch drill bit. For bucking the rivets, I have an old sledgehammer head here. You're going to need a metal block of some sort, and you want some good heft to it. I made myself a bucking tool, which this video I'll show you how I made that, but you're going to want some sort of a bucking tool that either you can hit with your own hammer or something that you can hit with a air hammer, which is what I'm going to use today. You're going to need a punch for driving the old rivets out. Some of them I'm going to actually seal up with a little bit of a sealant on there because the holes may be questionable or if I got a crack in them. You obviously need some aluminum blind rivets. These are 1/4-inch shanked rivets for this boat. The wire brush I'm using is a 2-inch wired cup brush. I just bought that from Home Depot. A hammer. I'm going to need a grinder to clean up some of them because some of them actually have some sealant over the top of it that I do have to remove first. And the one tool for making the bucking tool, I used a cut-off saw. So let me go ahead and show you first how I made my tool. So what I have done is, this is actually a hammer shank that you can buy in one of the packages. I believe they sell them with Harbor Freight. I've had this one laying around from Matco from years ago. I hardly ever use it anymore, but it came in absolutely perfect to make a bucking tool out of it. So what actually happens is I can load it up into my air hammer, and this is the side that when I go to drive it down and collapse the rivet, that it'll actually fit right into the head of the bucking of the hammer end. What I've done with it is I've concaved. If you see on the tool, it actually has a curve to it. It's rounded, and what I've done on my hammer is I've rounded it out so that rivet actually fits almost perfectly in there. Notice it doesn't completely collapse it. There's a little bit of a lip on there. That's just so it'll get a good crushing ability on the boat. I can make sure I get good compression on it. So how I made it is I took my hammer end from my air chisel and I put it in my vise. I took my grinder, which obviously has a rounded edge on it because it's a circle. And what I did is, because it's a circle, if you look on there, if you go right into the middle of it, it makes a perfect divot. Now that divot is only going to be this way, as far as you can go, so it's going to be a little bit uneven. But as I was doing it, I just took it, I spun it a little bit, I went back on with my tool, did a little bit more shaving on it, if you want to call it, until I got to that desired depth. So if you see it, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close. Works really good. So if you can make something like this, I do encourage you to do it, but it's an invaluable tool when you're doing this. So let me go ahead and show you how you actually use it now. So the first thing you want to do when you're tackling this kind of repair is decide, do I need to replace the rivet or can I just rebuck it? Because when it comes right down to it, it's still an aluminum piece and it still has a little bit more squish left on it, especially because they work themselves loose a little bit. Oftentimes you can just go at it with a hammer and with your bucking tool and your bracket, and you can pop them a little bit closer. It spreads out a little bit more, fills up that hole, and it does stop the leak. It's a very viable repair, and if you can get to the back side of your pop rivets, that's what I would do, and that's what I'm going to do right now. Is I'm going to go through and look at all the pop rivets. I originally went through and painted all these white because these were originally leaking, the ones that I painted white. So I ground off a couple of them already that I knew that were leaking, and I did that pretty much with my wire brush. And you're going to want to do that for the inspection too. So regardless of whether or not you're gonna rebucket, keep the old one in there and bucket again, or if you're going to replace it, you still want to clean it first. Once you clear the actual paint away to get down to bare metal is when you're going to see any stress cracks. And that's what happens on these pop rivets when they start to wear. The pop rivet when there will basically wear, and it'll get a little bit of play in it. And I don't really have any right now that are loose, but when they get really bad, they'll actually get loose and they'll start rocking back and forth. And that rocking back and forth causes stress fractures in the metal. And regardless if you put a new pop rivet in there, if there's a stress crack there, it's a crack that at this point in time may or may not go all the way through, and it may not leak at this point in time. But any crack that's not taken care of is going to spread. It's not a matter of will it spread, it's a matter of when it's going to spread and it's going to get through the other side. As soon as it gets through the other side, it's going to leak. And if you have a crack here that's a 0.5 millimeter long, in 2 years, that crack's going to be all the way over here because it's just going to spread. So you want to make sure that you inspect it and make sure that that hole isn't compromised, that there isn't a crack in it. So let's go ahead and clean a couple of these up. I'll start with this one down here that I didn't do yet. Like I said, I have it chucked up in my drill. Get it nice and clean. Now, from the looks of that one, I don't think it needs anything. I'm kind of curious about this right here. I'll get a closer look at that and see if that's a crack. I don't think it is, but if it is, I'll repair that. Let's look at the top one here. I got to get these paint off here too. One other thing I want to address, what doesn't surprise me is that the majority of my leaks are on the front of the boat right here. The reason being is this is the first surface that hits when you bring it into the dock and you're docking your boat. This is the first part of your boat that takes the damage. If there's a rock there, something there, those are going to hit. Even though you got little ribs there, you're going to take its wear on these pop rivets. They're kind of like face in where they're going. So looking at a couple of these, I can see on this one, I can see air on this one. I can even get a fingernail in there. So this one I'm going to try rebucking. This one's getting pretty thin. I may end up replacing that one. This one I'm missing a good portion of the back side of the pop rivet right here. So I'll probably replace that one too, up here. You can kind of see here's another one that I can catch my nail on it under there. I might hit that with the bucking tool and see. So let's go ahead and get the bucking tool set up and we'll hit a couple of these that need to be rebucked and see how they look afterwards. I went through and I tightened all the pop rivets that were leaking, indicated by the little white marks that I had on them. This pop rivet right here, I'm going to end up replacing it. It is so flat that I don't really feel comfortable trying to mushroom it out anymore because I'm pretty sure it's at its wit's end already. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that one. So what you need to start with is a center punch. And what I do is center punch it right in the middle of that pop rivet. So I got my hammer. Cool thing is aluminum. So it hammers pretty good. So now what I've got here is my 1/4" drill bit. Now what I'm going to do with this drill bit is I'm not going to drill all the way through it. I'm just going to drill through the middle of it, and I'm going to kind of open up that hole and get as much material out of it as I can until I can just drive the pop rivet out. So let me go ahead and do that. So you see I got a little bit of material coming out. It doesn't take much. It does not take much to hollow that out. And what I'm trying to do is I'm not trying to go all the way through it. So if you can see, I've got enough of a divot in there. What I'm doing now is take a punch. That punch is about just a little bit under a 1/4". I put a little bit of a point in it so it fits in there well. And then your pop rivet's out. You can see I still got a pretty decent sized hole there. I didn't pop through it with the drill. If you're confident that you can pop rivet this, if you're confident that you can take your drill and put it right in the center of that and drill all the way through and hit that hole straight on, you're more than welcome to do that. But doing it like this and just hollowing that out is pretty much ensuring that you're not going to hit any of that metal structure and compromise the size of that hole. So now that I got my wire wheel, a lot of times what happens under here is you get some corrosion underneath the pop rivet. That's pretty much why they start leaking, because it starts to corrode just a little bit, and that just wears the aluminum down. So take your brush and clean it up. So make sure you've got a nice fresh hole. Now I'm looking at it, I don't see any hairline cracks. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got my new pop rivet blind, and we're going to secure that in there. So the nice thing about the aluminum brazier rivets, which is what these are, or they call them the blind rivets, is that they don't require any sealant. I'm not going to put any sealant on this because once it swells up, it's a watertight seal. It should last for 10 years before it happens. So I'm all cleaned up. Hands on the inside, ready to hold the block on there. One thing that you want to say is make sure that whoever's doing it on the other side, it's like an echo chamber. Make sure that they have ear protection. Ready? I got my pop rivet installed. I got all the good pop rivets, if I should say, the ones that don't have an oddball repair on it, all tightened up on here. Right now I kind of want to talk about what are your options for repairing a leak other than replacing a pop rivet or what they call bucking them, retightening them up or bucking them. There's really 3 ways you can do it. There's the marine sealant. I have Loctite PL, marine, and Mass Cure. This is about the same as what they would call, I believe it's the 3M 5200. What the 3M 5200 is and what this is considered a permanent repair, kind of similar, everybody's familiar with JB Weld, but it's specifically made for marine products. Yes, you can use these to seal up your pop rivets. That is not anything that I would worry about doing, other than the fact of, remember when I talked about when pop rivets come loose, they rattle in the hole, they could cause a stress crack. If you use this Loctite, you are taking on the chance that there may have been a stress crack underneath there. And even though you're putting this epoxy JB Weld over the top of it, if there's a crack there, it's still going to spread. This doesn't get into the crack, it doesn't seal up the crack, it doesn't fix the crack, it covers the crack. But a crack is still going to expand and go because it's inside the metal, and it's going to eventually work its way out, vibrating, kind of like a windshield when it cracks. It may be that small in one day, but in a week it spreads. The vibration causes it to spread out. Loctite, JB Weld, none of that material is going to stop that from happening. So use it with caution when you do that. This boat has a couple of these repairs. I'm not sure if it was JB Weld, which is going to be the same thing. You know, JB Weld is you can't use it on the bottom side of the boat. It does work. It's not going to last more than 5-6 years before it's going to start leaking, and you have to do it over again. The third way, which I don't have here, is if you have MAP gas and you have some aluminum soldering wire. That's a really good solid repair. Again, if you're going to fix a rivet like that, I would just replace the rivet. It's really that easy if it's the rivet. You got a hole like this, brazing it with another piece of filler aluminum, awesome repair. This one I think was TIG welded. It may have been aluminum MIG welded, but either way, it's a solid repair. I am going to clean off one of these and see if I can get down to that original pop rivet and get this cleared off and actually replace it with a pop rivet. I haven't done this before. I don't know what I'm looking at when I get down there, but worst case scenario, I can make a video and show you how to braze an aluminum boat up. So I'm going to get my tools and get to do a little bit of grinding down here and see if I can get that cleared off and see what's under there. Good news. They did exactly what I suspected. They had a leaky pop rivet like one of these, and they took JV Weld, marine sealant, whatever it was, and they just went over the pop rivet to fix it. Now, I will say that I don't think all of these were leaking, but I do believe one of these were leaking. I just marked them all because I didn't like it. But a good thing to take home with you to really understand is the fact that even though he had that sealant on there, it may have stopped that leak whenever they put it on. But as you can see, it's not a permanent repair. It leaked again, and they will leak again. The best way to repair a pop rivet, if you don't have a compromised hole, put a pop rivet in. If you can get to that back side of it, put a brazier pop rivet in. If you can't get the back side of it, you can still buy 1/4-inch closed end pop rivets that you can put into a gun that are closed end where water won't go through it. So even if you don't have access to it, you can still replace that pop rivet with another pop rivet. You just may have something in the bottom of your boat that rattles around, because the only way to get that pop rivet out on the backside is to pop it through. But to me, it's worth it. I would rather have that little bit of whatever's in the bottom of my boat to make sure I'm not going to sink to the bottom of it and replace that pop rivet. So let me go ahead and hammer that and drill this one out, and then we'll put a new pop rivet on this side too. So if you look there, it was actually a decent hole. There was no stress cracks or anything there, so if the pop rivet would have been used right away, we wouldn't have had a leak there. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, that pop rivet will fit perfectly in there. Before I do that though, so I don't stress my wife out too much with the hammer, I'm going to get the rest of these drilled out that I can. And then we're going to go ahead and just put the pop rivets all in one shot, so we don't have to keep ringing her ears, boxing her ears. We got that one out right here. That was the test run that we did earlier. I was able to get these cleaned off. I started going out with a grinder, but then the more I looked at it, the more I realized that if I just got myself a nice strong scraper, and this is a heavy solid one that you use for like gaskets and whatnot, I was able to chunk it off So that's how I got these two off right here, is just trying to get under a bit of it. Once I broke a piece of it off, I was able to pretty much chop it off pretty easy. So I got out all the pop rivets that I could get out. There were towards the middle and the back of the boat. They brazed them. You know, we do know that this boat has had aluminum work done on it before. Somebody has been in it with a welder. Those they did weld. I have a couple of them marked. What I'm probably going to do is grind them down a little bit and use some of the JB weld, or maybe I'll go and get some more brazing rod and fill them up. So I don't know if any of you noticed my center punch. It's an old extension. There was a time when I lost my center punch, and I really needed a center punch at the time. So what I did was took an old crusty extension that I had, which is hardened steel, took it to the grinder and put a little tip on it, and you know what? I've been using this thing for years. I don't recommend ruining an extension for it, but this was already a garbage extension that I just had that was already mushroomed over at the end, so pretty good punch. And I hammer on that pretty hard, and I haven't had to sharpen that tip in a long time. After a lot of thinking, what I've decided to do with these, since they really weren't leaking that bad, I am going to fill them up with the Loctite PL. Not the ideal fastener for it. It's not quite as strong as the 5200. The 5200 is a permanent bond. They consider it a permanent bond. This they also consider a permanent bond, but it's more flexible. It's going to stay flexible. Since it's on the bottom of the boat here, and I'm just trying to seal up any of the holes and the imperfections in the weld, I think it'll be a good choice for it because it'll still have that little bit of that flexibility. It stays solid underwater, so the water's not going to affect it. So I'm hoping for the best. We'll monitor it as with the life of the boat, and then worst case scenario, I'll just clean all this out and I'll get some brazing rod and go over all these if it needs to in the future. But until then, let's go ahead and give this a shot. What I got here is a putty knife. I did polish the putty knife down, so that's just stains, believe it or not. So I'm going to goop some of this on and get around. It comes out pretty thick. I'll get around the whole piece of the hull of that repair. What I'm going to do with the putty knife, I'm going to smooth it out, do the actual repair, smooth it all down, cover it up completely, add a little bit more right here so we can make sure we get a full seal over that. Probably not going to look the prettiest. So with that, I got the majority of that weld finished. It should cure within 24 hours. I'll give it a little sand so it knocks it down. I can smooth it off and go ahead and paint it. But I'm going to go ahead and get all of these filled in like that. I'll be right back. Not the prettiest right now. Like I said, I put it on as a secondary precaution to stop the tiny leak in it. Once it's done, I should be able to take a quick little high grit, maybe I think I have some 6000 grit, something to just smooth it out, to make it look a little bit better, to blend it in before we paint it. So we got all of our pop rivets drilled out, ready to go. Got to clean it up a little bit. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to stand the boat up again, so it makes it a little bit easier for the person on the backside to do the pop rivet. So let's get it stood up. Makes a lot of racket when it gets over center, but now I'm actually sitting in a spot where we can easily access the holes from either side, so I'm gonna get those installed. This part of the project is done. This is probably one of the scariest repairs for somebody to do because it's a leak. You know, people are afraid to drill at the bottom of the boat, take pop rivets out because, yeah, it's a leak point and you don't want your boat ending up at the bottom of the water when you're out fishing. Just be confident in it. It's really not that difficult to replace the pop rivets. So far now we've got the majority of pop rivets up here. I got all the front ones replaced. There's no JV weld anymore on that front lip, which is good. I still have a couple of welded joints. This one wasn't leaking, so I left it. The other joints that were leaking, they really weren't leaking that bad. It probably took a good 5-10 minutes before I even noticed they were leaking. So I did go through and just rebuck them with our tool and the sledgehammer, so they should stop leaking. These back here, I did use the Loctite adhesive on it. Like I said, I don't know if it's going to work or not. I suspect it's going to work because I'm really not fixing a huge leak. I'm fixing a pinhole through a weld. This stuff dries within 2 hours and cures within 24 hours. So I'm going to let this cure. The next step we'll be doing is painting the boat. So at that time, we're going to do a fresh sand on it to get the paint to adhere to it. And at that time, I'll sand down these 2 points just so it looks a little bit prettier and it paints well. So with that said, like and subscribe. The next thing we'll be doing within the next couple of days here is the sanding and painting of the boat. So make sure you subscribe. Keep an eye out on the channel for more videos on the boat. And until then, happy fishing.